Welcome to a brand new episode of Law and Batting Order. I'm your host, Tony Iliakostas. Here's some quick hits from the past few weeks. Most of America didn't know who Vincent Viola was until Friday, when it was officially announced that the New York businessman bought the NHL franchise Florida Panthers for $250 million. The Panthers, who have struggled over the past few years, are shifting into a new era with Viola at the helm, and there are hopes that the team will adopt a winning mantra that will ultimately lead to them hoisting up the Lord Stanley Cup. This story is especially near and dear to me because Mr. Viola is an alumnus of New York Law School, which is the law school that I'm attending. But this story is also special because I'm best friends with Mr. Viola's son, Travis, and to see his dad's success makes me happy. So to Mr. Viola and the entire Viola family, on behalf of Labo Nation, the entire New York Law School body, and the sports law community around the whole world, congratulations on this momentous and extraordinary event. And please know, Mr. Viola, that you have an open invitation to be a guest on Law and Batting Order anytime. Shifting from the ice to football, the NFL has started off with some pretty big surprises. One of the big surprises is happening in South Beach as the Miami Dolphins are off to a great start, holding a 3-0 record at the time this episode was filmed. Likewise, I have to give props to the Kansas City Chiefs, who are also 3-0 under their new head coach, Andy Reid. While there are winning teams turning heads, there are other teams that are just playing horrible football. The Green Bay Packers have been playing lackluster football, and so have the Washington Redskins. But one of those teams who happens to be playing the worst football this year has to be my team, the New York Giants. They are 0-3 thus far and make the Bad News Bears look like all-stars compared to them. I know it's early in the season, but I can't help but feel demoralized at how awful this team is playing. So on a scale of 1 bobblehead of me to 5, how am I going to rate the Giants' season so far? That's right, 1 bobblehead for playing the wimpiest football and the most awful football a human being could ever watch this season. The 2013 MLB season is winding down, and the season is ending with some genuine feel-good stories. One of them involves the success of the Pittsburgh Pirates, who not only finished the season with a winning record, but will be going to the playoffs for the first time since 1992. But the end of the season requires a mention of single-handedly one of the best closers Major League Baseball has ever seen. In an emotional 4 minutes and 54 seconds, fans around the world celebrated the end of Mariano Rivera's career at Yankee Stadium. Being greeted by applause and cheers, Mariano teared up as Andy Pettitte and Derek Jeter came to visit Mariano on the mound. Mariano Rivera is the last active MLB player to wear Jackie Robinson's number 42. Mariano has embodied the spirit and character of Jackie Robinson throughout his entire playing career, always playing with heart and class every time. It's hard to see the Sandman exit, but he will go down in the books as the best reliever to ever play the sport of baseball. Today's Order of the Court will discuss the issue of fan violence, particularly regarding an incident that happened a few days ago in San Francisco near AT&T Park. On Wednesday night, following the Giants' win over the Dodgers, a fight ensued outside of a nightclub between Jonathan Denver, a Dodgers fan, and the suspect Robert Montgomery, a Giants fan. Reports regarding the incident are mixed. There are some reports that Montgomery intentionally killed Denver after there was an exchange of words that turned physical. Likewise, there are equally conflicting reports that Robert Montgomery acted in self-defense after Jonathan Denver jumped him. Denver, who was wearing Dodgers gear, was stabbed to death, and Robert Montgomery was taken into custody, and at the time this episode was being written, the charges against Montgomery were not definite. But, according to the law, he could potentially be charged with homicide. Just a quick disclaimer that while this is a real-life case and situation, my thoughts are purely speculative. This is not the first time we've seen fan violence, especially between Dodgers and Giants fans. In 2003, a Giants fan was shot by a group of drunk Dodgers fans after a fight ensued outside of Dodger Stadium. Likewise, on opening day 2011, Giants fan Brian Stowe was beaten to a pulp outside of Dodger Stadium, leaving him in a coma for months. Thankfully, Stowe is alive, but still recovering from his injuries. The Giants-Dodgers rivalries is one of the most ruthless baseball rivalries, and it's a real shame that the rivalry goes into the stands, causing fans to fight with one another. While fan violence is old news, it's an act that should never be condoned, especially because the frequency and extent of fan violence has increased exponentially over the years. So in this particular case, what could the future potentially hold in store for Robert Montgomery? How will his legal battle play out if he were to go to trial? In this episode, I'll talk about the charges that this Giants fan will likely face and what he may realistically be found guilty of. California's Penal Code Section 189 defines what qualifies as first-degree murder. In relevant part, all murder which is perpetrated by any other kind of willful, deliberate, and premeditated killing is murder of the first degree. To prove killing was deliberate and premeditated, it shall not be necessary to prove the defendant maturely and meaningfully reflected upon the gravity of his or her act. The latter part of this statutory definition is important. Typically, in cases of first-degree murder, the prosecution has the burden of proving that the defendant premeditated his acts and deliberated on how he was going to achieve his end goal, which is murder. However, as California's Penal Code suggests, it is not necessary to prove the length of time that it takes the defendant to premeditate and deliberate his act. This matters here because the prosecution can argue that Robert Montgomery took all of a split second to premeditate and deliberate the crime of murdering Jonathan Denver simply because he was wearing Dodgers gear. California's Penal Code 189.5 offers the defendant an opportunity to mitigate homicide charges or raise defenses, but the burden falls on the defendant to successfully achieve this goal. The defendant can have his charges brought down to manslaughter. In this particular case, while the facts are still scarce and the case is in very premature phases, a charge of manslaughter seems more likely. According to California's Penal Code Section 192, manslaughter is the unlawful killing of a human being without malice. In the murder of Jonathan Denver, voluntary manslaughter seems most applicable as it is manslaughter caused upon a sudden quarrel or heat of passion. The reason why voluntary manslaughter is most applicable is because this wasn't a situation that Robert Montgomery thought about prior to going out. From the accounts at the time of this incident, it was at the spur of the moment that Mr. Montgomery and Denver exchanged words, and by acting rashly without deliberating, Montgomery proceeded to stab Denver to death. Upon completion of this episode, news broke that the San Francisco District Attorney's Office was not going to charge Robert Montgomery with homicide due to a lack of evidence. Conflicting stories suggest, as I mentioned earlier, that Mr. Montgomery acted in self-defense. So while Montgomery walks away a free man, one fact remains certain. Fan violence is becoming too commonplace in sports. A good old sports rivalry is fine and dandy, but to have a rivalry escalate to actual violence among fans is totally unnecessary and uncalled for. Hopefully, in light of this recent incident, fans will be more tame and perhaps teams will do their due diligence in diminishing the occurrences of fan violence. That's the show. Leave all your comments down below and be sure to visit Law and Batting Order at lawandbattingorder.com as well as on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Take care, guys.